Did you know that the Egyptian pyramid, the Mona Lisa, which is Leonardo da Vinci's art piece, and pretty well every single piece of art that he created in the later years of his life, Michelangelo's art, the art of Raphael. Now, as I'm mentioning this, these are some of the most studied and they're some of the things in life that have been put on the highest pedestal of art and architecture and creation. You know, amazing cathedrals like the Chartres Cathedral in France. Did you know that they all use the same mathematical ratio to inform their creations? There's something called the golden mean or the golden section. 1.618 is the ratio. And that ratio defines harmony. So if you study geometry and you get into people like Buckminster Fuller, these genius level people who he literally probably deserves the Nobel Prize from mathematics. I think no one really understood what he was trying to say, but he boiled down geometry to the level of the absolute quantum level. And he proved mathematically that the golden mean was a reason for these geometries, and it's the reason for harmony. So this is what ties all of these things together. It's this concept of harmony. And it's so fascinating that the greatest artists, the greatest architectures, the greatest ideas, the greatest geniuses throughout history have all aligned themselves to this. You see great philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and Pythagoras. They were obsessed with this idea of the golden mean. You know, it used to say above Plato's school, the academy, it used to say, let no one enter who is ignorant of geometry. So this is really what we're talking about. Geometry is harmony, the harmony of the world. So this is obviously a very, very important concept. And my goal has always been to get people into the golden mean. I literally have it tattooed on my hand. It's right next to my thumb and my finger. And the reason that I have it there is to remind me that everything I write, everything I do, everything I type, everything I do with my hands, that's my goal. That's my one chief aim in my life. I want to help to bring this to the eyes of as many people as I can, and to show people the harmony that I was able to find in the chaos. And there's so much meaning in that for me. So obviously in my business, that's what I primarily do. I try and help people to find the golden mean of business, or the golden section. It's the same thing. And what I'm sharing today is perhaps one of the most important and most relevant golden means that I've found in business. And it's a way to manage your time to ensure that you are operating through your genius. So stick with the podcast. I'm going to talk through 3 specific templates and models that I use to ensure that I keep my time focused on high priorities and I get rid of the lower priorities that are taking me away from my genius. So look, hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't yet grabbed a copy of my book, definitely go and do that. It's benslatersbook.com. That's benslatersbook.com. Inside there, I actually talk quite in depth about a lot of these philosophies. It's called The Business Owner's Guide to Profit. So on the front end, you may not realize that I go very deep into geometry, and the whole system is actually based on this sacred geometry that I found in my studies and has become one of my major studies. So I'm excited to share it with you. I'm grateful that you're here, and let's get into this episode. I've heard it said that all results begin in truth. And I'd like to share the truth of my business just a couple of months ago. You see, I was working really hard to scale things up. At this stage, I'd bought countless programs, was reading so many business books. I was really going down this rabbit hole. You see, I just employed some new staff members, and my team had grown from very, very small, literally just me at one stage about 12 months ago, to a stage where I had 10 people working with me in the business. Now, that was a bit of an explosion of responsibility. And as a result, you see, what I've always done for as long as I can remember, I used to play a lot of sports, a lot of rugby. And I used to thrive in that environment because I used to always just do more. I tried to be the first person up off the line when I was playing rugby. And that's something my dad taught to me. And this became embedded in my thinking, is that when you were running up off the line, it was always best to go first. Now, taking that mindset into business can really help you to get things up off the ground. It can help you to get to a certain point. But once you get to that point, there's a great saying, what got you to where you are isn't going to get you to where you were going, right? It was too reliant on hustle and human energy. And at that point, when I was shifting from being a technician to being more of a manager and someone focused more on growth, I had to go through this cycle of evolution. Like, I forced myself to evolve. Now, a few months later, I can finally tell you that the team is humming along really nicely. A lot of the chaos has some order to it. And it feels like, well, for me right now, I can tell you that the business is the best that it's ever been. Now, it wasn't free, it was hard fought, and I want to teach you some of the principles that I've discovered along the way so that you can get there a little bit faster, hopefully, and with a little bit less chaos as well. So, taking it back to when I hired all those staff members, I was on a hamster wheel. I was working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, just hustling. I was the man wearing many hats. I was wearing the marketing hat, the sales hat, the delivery hat, the finance hat, the problem-solving hat. Every single thing in the business, it was like a top-down structure, right? Like, everything was coming through me. Now, today what happens is the business is more of a geometric structure, in that people have responsibilities and they roll those responsibilities out, sometimes without any impact from me whatsoever. Yes, I built the system, but it's not a top-down structure anymore. Now, there's a few pieces that I want to teach you when it comes to this, but I've essentially created an exercise to get business owners out of the weeds and focused on growth. You see, what I've discovered is that there's 4 tiers of business activities, and they roll up. So you can imagine a triangle coming down, like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for business. The bottom level is admin. Now, the thing about admin, the deeper down you go into these 4 levels, and each level within has a spectrum. So this is a spectrum of business tasks is what we're really talking about here. The lower that you go into this hierarchy, the more frequent the tasks will be and the more urgent they will be. And my first mentor taught that to me, Lachlan Cameron. He told me, Ben, the most important things as a leader in a business, the most important tasks are the unurgent important tasks. That's a fascinating idea, a fascinating concept. Yet as business owners, it's so easy for us to get pulled into the urgent important tasks, which are actually the ones that you want to distance yourself from as the visionary, as the thinker, as the leader. Because the more that you operate through those lower levels, the more distracted you'll be, the less focused on higher priorities, and the less creative you'll be. So that's level 1. We've got this admin tasks. And then we jump up from admin and we have the technician. The technician is specialist tasks inside the business. So this might be writing copy for a Facebook ad, or launching your Facebook ad campaign, or writing an email, publishing an email, or doing a sales call. Any function of the business, usually across marketing, sales, delivery, and finance, usually lives within that technician area. From my experience, most business owners who are below 7 figures in income, they have a goal to get beyond 7 figures. Yet, unfortunately, they get sold into the trap by marketers that you need a silver bullet, that you need this specific tactic or strategy or thing to do with your sales calls. So essentially what you do is you chase your tail around for months and sometimes years, just being a technician and not rising to those higher levels in your business. Now, the next level is manager. So this was the big transition that I'd made, right? I was a great technician. I'm great at writing copy. I can speak, I can share my message with people, I can go on videos, I can do all of the things that I need to do. But when this team came on board, I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing with managing people. And as a result, whenever there was a problem in the business, I would just go back into the weeds and do it myself. So for the more team that I brought on, this huge polarity started to arise in me that was, well, I've got all these team and I'm responsible for them, but now I've got to work harder than ever to get things to work and to pay the bills and to do everything. So this is where the hamster wheel comes in. And you see, the dichotomy was that I wasn't actually stepping into my leadership role. I wasn't calling people to a higher level of responsibility in the business. So therefore, I wasn't being a manager. I was being the technician. And then you've got the level on top. So there's 4 levels. So far, we've got admin down the bottom. We have the technician. Then we have the manager. And then we have growth, which is up the top. So those are the 4 levels of business task that you can be performing. So some very important questions that you need to start asking. How much time are you spending in your admin tasks, your technician, your manager, and your growth? What you'll find is it's probably 80-20, or even worse, it's probably 90-10 or 95-5. But really, for you to grow your business and become someone of real worth, you need to start shifting the game when it comes to that equation. You need to rise through those levels and understand how to manage people. So many business owners that I speak with, they have a story that they're not good managers. And yes, that story might be true in the beginning, but just like everything else, it can be learnt. And it can be incredibly simple when you know how to do it. You see, the story that I used to tell myself was that, I'm just better at doing my own thing. I'm fairly introverted as a person. I'm incredibly introverted, actually. I prefer sitting at home reading books than going to parties. That doesn't interest me at all. Reading books and just diving through info, mostly from dead people, is what really, really interests me. So I had this idea in my head that, oh no, I'm not meant to manage people. But I really had to break that down. You see, once you really understand the benefits of having a team is when you'll start to thrive. And here's where I'd like to introduce the second concept to you. So I'm going to go through 3 specific concepts that's going to give us what's called an energy quotient on the sort of work that you're doing. So stick with me here because we're going to build on these concepts as we go. So the second concept, I learnt this off 2 people that I've combined into the one. A man called Dan Sullivan and my mentor, Dr. John DiMartini. So John taught me that every single human being in the world has a series of values. It's essentially a hierarchy of priorities in their life from number 1, most important, to anywhere from 6 to 12 values some people have usually. They can have more. It's just a list coming in. So whenever you perceive something through the senses, you touch it, you taste it, you see it, you feel it, or you have any interaction with the outside world, the very first thing that you do in your mind is you filter whatever that piece of information is through your value system. And a good example is this. If there's a mother who has just had a baby, her highest value is very likely to be the nurturing of that child and raising that child in many, many cases. So let's just imagine that that's correct. She walks into a store and she's going to have her reticular activation system in the brain heat-seeking to find, okay, exactly what are the things that I need to fulfill my highest value. Now, if you put me in that scenario, I wouldn't even see any of that stuff. You see, I would be going straight to the book section or maybe to some food because that's on my values. So we are literally, as human beings, designed to fulfill our voids with the most value. You see, the values that we have in our life, this hierarchy of values, are actually defined by our voids, the things that we felt like were missing in our lives. So for me, for example, I would have told you my story in episode 3 of the podcast. If you haven't listened to that, definitely go back and listen to some of that stuff. You'll hear me go pretty deep into my history of drug abuse, of serious mental health problems, and psychosis. So I value more than anything else in the world the mind. I value growing my mind. I want to be remembered as a great genius throughout history. And I want to just grow and learn as much as humanly possible during my life. It is the one thing no one has to ever remind me to do. I'm always reading. I've read 5 books this week and it's only Friday. So for some people, that might be incredibly unusual, right? To read 5 books in a week. Most people don't read 5 books in a year. So what's going on there? Well, what's actually happening is I have some really deep voids in my life, moments where I felt like I didn't even exist when I had this psychosis, the moments where everything was just crumbling around me and I felt like I had lost everything that I cared about. So for me, this whole journey of personal development that I go on, that my whole life is designed around, literally I have a 50% weighting in terms of my values on this concept of increasing my consciousness, increasing my awareness, actually comes from those deep void moments of feeling like I didn't exist. So for me, what I'm really doing is I'm trying to give my suffering meaning, right? This is what's called the telos. So all of this study, what I'm speaking about right now, is from a study called teleology. And teleology was an ancient Greek study, and I would guess that it goes even further behind that. And you don't really have to guess, because a lot of the lessons from Pythagoras and Plato that informed a lot of the Greeks, Thales, another philosopher, actually came from Egypt. So it's a bit older than the Greeks. So what we could say is teleology is a very ancient study. It's the study of meaning and purpose. Yet not many people will dive into that today, right? They were studying meaning and purpose back then. And we think we're, incredibly evolved today. And yes, we are in many, many concepts. But this ancient wisdom of teleology and values is so incredibly important. Because when I'm personally engaging in my highest values, my whole life synchronizes. And I'm guaranteeing you have this too. You have that one thing that you can do in your life. It's called the telos, the highest value, your chief aim. That when you do that, you flow. When you do that, you're creative, you're inspired, you're certain, you are far more intuitive. You just feel like you're in flow. There's been this whole recent development in the West where everyone's talking about flow, and yes, we need to find flow, and how do we get into flow? For me, flow is just simply living in alignment with your highest values. Because when you live in alignment with your highest values, you are operating through the highest potential that you have as a human being. You see, this is what you should build your business around. My business is built around me acquiring information in various different levels, and then teaching that information, modeling that information, and turning it into business strategies, tactics, and principles that people can use. So I have monetized my ability to chase my telos, to chase my highest value. And when I do that, I become more certain, more enthusiastic. I just have presence. I love what I do. And you see, this is where the problem becomes in business, is anytime you get pulled into the weeds, you're likely going to be pulled away from your highest value, and you're not going to be expressing it in the most unique and fulfilling way. So Dan Sullivan would also say, so that's a bit of a background in John's material of values. Incredibly, incredibly important to understand about yourself. What are your values in life? Dr. Demartini actually has a test that you can do on this. If you go to drdemartini.com/values, he asks you 13 questions. You can just type in your response and you'll be able to discover what your values are. I literally just did mine last week. My values are education, higher learning, consciousness, wisdom is the first one. The second one is business. The third one is health. And then it pretty much drops off after that. I'm a very simple man. I only have 3 things that I really, really care about in the world. And I'm blessed that one of those is wisdom, because wisdom really affects everything. So that's why I'm so interested in all of these different concepts and ideas and things. I'm never bored in my life, because I can always think about, what's the principle behind this? And that's what makes me thrive. So definitely go and do that test. If you haven't done it, it's very insightful and very, very helpful. So what we could do is actually look at a hierarchy in your business when it comes to the tasks that you're performing. And what I created was 4 separate buckets that we could put every single task into. So we've got the top level, which is our telos activities. So I'm sure that as I've been describing this and speaking about this and telling stories about this and using my own life as the example, you've pulled up immediately what your telos activities are. And if you haven't, sit there for a couple of minutes, pause the podcast, sit there and really think about, what are my telos activities? What are those activities that make me certain, enthusiastic, creative, inspired, that literally bring a tear to my eye, that just fill me up with God, right? That is the word enthusiasm, is enthused, filled with God is the statement there. So whatever that is for you, that's your telos. But let me ask you this. How many hours per day are you putting into those activities? You see, people think I'm weird because I read for 2 or 3 hours every day. But for me, that's my highest value activities. That's not weird to me. It's perfect. I would spend 5 or 6 doing that. So this is the piece here, is if you can do this, you'll become a person of higher worth. You become more of a genius in that specific area. So then we have the second activities. So we've got our telos, and then we have what I call excellent. Now, the difference between excellent and telos is going to be the love. You see, I'm excellent at copywriting. I'm even excellent, I would say, at certain types of videos and sharing my message. But do I love it? No. It isn't a complete and utter 100% love for me. So this is the differentiation between the two levels. So you've got the telos, and then you have the excellent tasks. The third one is what's called competent. Now, competent will be average for you. So if you line up 100,000 people, you're like no better than anyone else. You're just an average sort of person. With the telos, if you line up 100,000 people, you're going to be in the top 5 or 10 or even the top 1 person in that specific thing. And then we've got the last one, which is despise. So despise is where you procrastinate, frustrate, hate, and just generally aren't very good at doing that thing. So very powerful exercise to do is to look at, where am I performing across my business? You see, I often speak to business owners and they tell me, Ben, I'm burnt out. And I go, tell me more. And they go, I can't even think. I've got so much stuff rolling around in my head. I've got monkey mind. I'm on the hamster wheel and all these things happening. And I go, okay, write down all the tasks that you're currently taking in the business. Just go through, bang, 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 bang. Anywhere from 25 to, I've seen as high as 250 tasks that people will take. Okay, let's now categorize them. What are telos? What are excellent? What are competent? And what are despise? Guess what I've found in 100% of the lives of the people who feel burnt out and feel like they're on the hamster wheel. They're spending more than 80% of their time in the competent and despise level of their business, in the technician and in the admin tasks in their business, and they're spending less than 20% in growth and manager, and less than 20% in telos and in excellent. So why am I bringing this up? Why am I diving into this? Because you need to relate these two concepts together to get yourself out of the idea that you're a bad manager. Because if you have that idea, you see more drawbacks than benefits of being a manager. Here is the greatest benefit for me of being a manager. By being a great manager, I free up my time. And when I free up my time, I don't just waste it. I invest that time into my telos activities. You see, when I had this breakthrough around the golden mean of business, being these telos activities that I do in my life, and if I built my business around that, and if I was to delegate all of the lower priorities in my life so I could focus more on that, I started to get into flow. I started to fall in love with my business again. But you see, the junction for me to fall in love with my business again, the junction for me to do those things was to be a great manager. The second that I had that breakthrough, I realized the story that everyone is telling themselves around, I'm not very good at managing people, is such a short-sighted myth. Because I'm telling you right now, if you knew just how much time, more energy, more money that you could invest into your highest values, your telos, and your business was the vehicle to do that, and that you being a great manager was the middle point, the facilitator to allow you to do that, I'm guaranteeing within a space of 30 days, your managing skills would be on point. They would be on fire. So this is the reason that you need to understand both, because without both, you won't have the energy and the fulfillment to actually pull it off. The enthusiasm, right? Everyone is enthused to the level at which you're speaking to their highest values. And you'll see this in conversation with people. If you're having a conversation with people and you start to go onto your highest values and that's not on their values, they'll be like, oh yeah, Ben, I'm just going to get a drink, going to the toilet, going to over here. And you'll notice it probably most frequently with family, I would imagine. You're speaking about the things that you love and everyone just decharges and they're like, not really interested, right? I'm sure you've had those experiences in your life. But a trick on this, if you understand how to communicate what's important to you through the filters of what's important to other people, that's where you're going to get that connection. So you see, what I'm trying to do for you here is really show you the value in becoming a manager. Because when you become a better manager, you will free up the time and space for you to do the things that are most meaningful for you. And when you do those meaningful things, you'll be in flow, you'll be in rhythm. You won't need a tactic, a strategy, a piece to do that, because you're going to be filled from within, right? You're going to be operating at a very high level. All masters throughout time, back as far as history will allow us to see, every single one of them delegated the lower priorities in their life so they could focus on their genius. I recently read the book Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson, one of my favorite books, beautiful, amazingly written book. Walter Isaacson is a fantastic biographer. You should read all of his biographies. He's got Steve Jobs, he's got Benjamin Franklin, he's got Einstein, and he has Leonardo da Vinci. 4 brilliant people, all polymaths in their own right. So reading this book, one of my favorite things in the book, so Leonardo da Vinci really wasn't that famous for most of his life, but towards the end of his life, he became a person of notoriety. He was pretty well the most revered artist towards the end of his life. And he had all of the most richest and most powerful people contacting him and saying, Leonardo, please come and paint my portrait. Please come and paint my portrait. We'll pay anything. We'll give you this castle. We'll give you all of these lands. We'll make sure your family is taken care of, X, Y, and Z. All of these things they rolled out. They're literally anything that he wanted, he could have had access to. And there's this really beautiful moment in the book where he's getting all of these requests just constantly. The Pope is saying, hey, come and paint the Pope. And he says, no. Every single one of them, he turns them down. And the reason is because he had planned to go away for the summer to go and study birds in the hills of Italy by himself. And I thought, when I read that, I smiled from ear to ear. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful things that I'd ever seen written in a book. And what I saw in that moment was the essence of genius. And it connected so significantly for me, because in your business and in your life, you're going to have opportunities that arise. You're going to have things that come in. And so often what we do, we make the mistake to trade away our values. We trade away our bliss, the things that are so meaningful to us that may not make sense to everyone else. I'm guaranteeing you there was not one person in Leonardo da Vinci's circle at that moment was like, hey, Leonardo, great idea. Go away to the hills by yourself and go and study birds, right? So powerful, really beautiful book. I highly recommend a read. So this is the telos concept, your genius. It has been called by Dan Sullivan your unique abilities. I prefer the telos idea just because it really goes beyond business and it transcends into life itself. And I think that's where the real gold is when you can build your business not around a product or a service necessarily, but build it around your genius. I think that's such a beautiful way to run your life and run your business. You'll never be without inspiration if you can operate from that space. So they're the first two concepts. So we've got the 4 levels, the 4 tiers of activity, and then we have the telos tiers of activity. So really what these two things are, they're ways to define what this task is from a structural level and a results-based level, the yang, and what this task is from the way it makes you feel, the yin of the task. So they are harmonized ways to study the hierarchy of your activities. And once you know this, just doing this task in and of itself is a huge breakthrough for people. Going through and just categorizing these things, immediately what you see is you're out of alignment. And all of the issues that are arising in the business are usually due to simply how you're performing, what tasks that you're taking. Everyone wants the silver bullet, but really the silver bullet is you. So moving on to the next concept, we have a concept that I learned from fantastic book called Traction by a guy called Gino Wickman. And they have a thing called the organizational chart inside that book. And I love this because it divides the functions of business into the in the business versus the on the business. So you have the functions that are in the business, and the most basic form of this, yours may be a little bit different, but this is the most basic form. I'll just cover the very basic piece of this. Marketing, sales, operations, finance, and admin as the 4 functions of business. So finance and admin is its own one, operations, sales is its own one, and marketing. They're the 4, and then you have on top the visionary and the integrator. And I think this is a very great idea. The difference between the visionary and the integrator. The visionary is the person creating the ideas and all the intellectual property. They're usually researching very heavily. They're the creative leader of the business. But what Gino Wickman found in his studies was that behind most great creative leaders, there's usually a systems manifester. There's usually someone who's grabbing that stuff and implementing it in the day-to-day. They're the person that integrates the visions and pulls them into the real world. So a good example of this is Walt Disney actually had a brother. And most people don't know the brother's name, but he ran the background day-to-day of the business while Walt Disney could dream and vision, and he pulled that down. Now, there's countless examples of this. Steve Jobs and Wozniak. There are so many. If you look into great businesses, usually you'll see that there is that relationship. So the next piece of the studying the tasks and really looking at the categories, like how are we performing here? And I think Gino Wickman put forth a really great thought that as business owners and just people in the business, you shouldn't be focused on more than 2 of the categories of business. Because if you are, you're going to feel like you have schizophrenia because you're having to operate through so many personas and do so many things that it's just going to burn you out and you're not going to be productive. I'd agree with that, right? But this is a really hard one for businesses doing under 6 figures because in reality, you have to be able to master marketing, sales, ops, and finance until you can get to the level where you can build team, because that's what finances the business growing forward. The ability to sell, deliver the service and market the service in a way that's profitable, which is your 4 tiers right there. So the truth of the scenario is you do have to work your way through them. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. You see, once you build something in your business, you should systemize it and move to the next level. You see, I meet so many business owners who are too, I want to say, attached to where they are. They're hanging on too tightly to their version of the world as it exists. Our problems can't be solved at the same level of consciousness or thinking that created them. So really the path of business is about evolving through these areas. I think the most important one there is to start in operations, is to deliver the product in the right way. And the next piece is sales, really understanding, how do I sell this product? The next one is marketing. And you really have to keep your eye on the finance ball, like all the way through. In my view, you have to make sure that there's profit moving onwards and that you're growing, all of that stuff. But that's the line that I think is the highest line of leverage, because you're moving from the lower form of leverage to the higher form of leverage in the business. But then as you start to build team, what you'll find is you start moving into the integrator. You see, the integrator is the person responsible for team meetings. They're the glue of the business. They're responsible for building the systems. They're responsible for any of the day-to-day runnings. They're responsible for the CRM, for problem solving, for those kind of things. Now, on the back of this, we've got the 3 ideas. We have the 4 tiers of business task that we went through in the beginning. We have the telos, which is how does this make me feel in relation to my personal values? And now we have the organizational chart. Which area of the business is this task operating through? Where is it living in terms of my roles and my responsibilities? Am I outside of my box? Now, as you could probably guess, the first time I did this exercise, what I found was that in every single area, in every single model, it was an 80-20. I was spending 80% of my time, effort, energy, resources, allocation in things that I shouldn't be. And as a result, I felt tired. I felt overwhelmed. I felt bored. I'd fallen out of love with my business. And the reason for the whole thing was because I wasn't living through my higher priorities. I'd allowed myself to fall down to my knees and be controlled by the lower priorities in my business. And you see, this is the real responsibility of you as a leader. And again, I'm going to hit pretty hard on this idea that you're not a manager, because the junction to get from where you are now, if you are on this hamster wheel, and about 95 or 99% of the people that I meet are on the hamster wheel. So it's heavily likely that you are in some form or another. The answer to get out of it is to really master this process of becoming a manager, of delegation, of results-based managing, and really helping people to produce the same results that you were already producing, if not better, in a more leveraged way. So this is the first part of the exercise that I call the golden section. And as mentioned, I called it the golden section because this is the center of the greatest artists, even mathematicians, philosophers. All of them dedicated themselves to the study of this golden mean. What is this and how is this expressing itself in these forms? So my question has always become, since I found that out, what is the golden mean of business? And what are the golden means of business? How can we fall into the center? How can we rise? How can we be in proportion with the world? How can we find harmony? Because this is really what the golden mean is all about. You see, what I found is the most efficient, effective, and least volatile path on growth, the path to growth and fulfillment, was by seeking to align your life with the golden mean in any single idea, concept, task that you were performing. And what I've laid out here is a way for you to do that. At least it's the first step in doing that. Because as I mentioned in the very first thing that I said on the podcast today, all results begin in truth. And the goal of this episode specifically was for me to align you to the truth of what is happening, to get you thinking on what is the truth of what I'm doing in my business right now. And is that aligned to where I want to go? Is that giving me energy? You see, every single task that you're performing in your business will either give you energy, it will be neutral to you, or it will take your energy. Yet, for some reason, business owners have been hypnotized into the concept that it's okay to spend more than 80% of their time outside of tasks that give them energy. But what I'm trying to encourage you to see and feel is that if you start operating through those tasks that give you energy every single day, you'll wake up before work. You won't trudge to work. You'll tap dance to work, as Warren Buffett would say. And when you start doing that, you'll become a better marketer. You'll become a better salesperson. You'll have better team and operations. You'll become a better leader. So this is really the key to fulfillment as you continue on the path to growth. My mentor Lachlan Cameron once said to me, Ben, the key to life is to be happy today while striving for more tomorrow. And if there was ever a more simple principle to live life by, I think that's it, right? It's so incredibly simple, yet it's so hard, and it feels so hard. I shouldn't say it's so hard. It feels so hard when you're so dedicated to growth, that you forget to be happy today. So that's all I'm trying to do in this episode, is align you to that. Now, if you want to take a deeper dive into some of the principles and mindsets that we've been covering in this episode, I have created a formal exercise and template called the golden section. We covered the first 3 areas of that. There are some more things that you can do on the back end. Once you know the reality, what do we do with it? Do we scale this exercise? Do we automate it? Do we outsource it? Do we delegate it? We cover that inside the training. So it just goes a little bit deeper into how to get this off the plate and get you focused on those higher priorities. Now, if you want to watch that training and claim the template, the link is leadflowmastery.com. leadflowmastery.com/the golden section. I will put a link down in the show notes below so you can just click straight through there. If this appeals to you, definitely dive in and check that out. Now, the final thing, if you're loving the podcast so far, obviously early days for the podcast right now, we've committed to publishing this long-term into the future, and would love it if you could give us a review. If you do find some value in the principles and stuff that we're sharing here, please give us a review. That will help us to spread the message and allow us to reach more people. Appreciate you. I will talk to you inside the next episode.